The fire raged along the walls as the man dragged me across the stone floor. I did not fight him. What would be the point? His strength was inhuman. He let go of me in the center of the chamber. The sweltering heat was too much to bear. I swallowed shallow, painful breaths and closed my stinging eyes. There was a sound of shifting stone. I stole a quick glance before once again shutting my eyes off from the intense heat. The opening was narrow, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. "Climb through," the man ordered. I did as he said, anxious to get somewhere cooler. I blinked as I crawled on my hands and knees and reached into the opening. A smooth surface descended at an angle. I slipped inside, arms first, and then quickly began to slide down the dark chamber. That's what it was. A slide. It wasn't fun in the way that slides usually are. I knew it likely wouldn't lead to anywhere pleasant. Around and around, I slid. And when it finally did end, I landed in a lit corner with a sand-covered floor. I was relieved it wasn't more blood. I looked to the side for the others. The image of a half-corpse woman riding down the slide seemed almost comical, but she never did come down. Instead, there was a shuffling of sand, and from it she emerged. And from the slide poured dozens of snakes. I jolted backward towards hell, somehow the more comforting figure amongst all else. The snakes slithered and twisted, and ultimately they once again became the red-headed man in green. "Who is he?" I whispered to Hell. Her voice was delayed, not out of confusion or fear. More so, she just chose to answer at her own pace. She said, "My father." The man did not look to be older than the woman, perhaps even the opposite, but the two of them having exhibited some sort of magic made me inclined to believe she was telling the truth. "What is his name?" The man lunged forward and stopped Hell. Not yet. Let's not spoil the surprise." "Why all the elusiveness? Just tell me," I argued. The man smiled.
"Oh, but you are ignorant in this form. The reveal will be so underwhelming if you do not remember."
"Then how am I to remember?"
"Eden's apples," he laughed.
"The fruit of the gods." Eden. The woman the one-eyed man had told me held the key to ending this. I wondered if Hell and her father were trying to help me, although they certainly did not feel like friends. "Where is this Eden?" I asked.
"The one who awaits keeps her near to him."
The bottom, I realized. How much farther would that be? I looked around the room. It was another empty chamber, minus the sand. "How do we get to the next room?" I asked. The man motioned at the sand. "Dig." I set down my sword and ran my hand through the fine grains of sand. Why is the tower designed this way? Getting to each chamber is so unnecessarily complicated. The man smiled. "I am the one who designed it." I looked up at him. "Why did you do it this way?"
"Because I am me."
"And who am I?"
"You are you. Now dig."
I turned back to the sand and began shoveling handfuls. It was not easy, as much of the sand would fall back in, refilling the hole. I quickened my pace, one scoop after another, until I reached something solid. "I found a door!" I exclaimed. "Hurry and open it, before the sand covers it again." The man chuckled as he reached for the door.
"Not sand,
It is bone. I looked around me, realizing the whiteness of it had been difficult to notice beneath the orange glow of the torches. The man lifted the door, bone pouring through the opening. He motioned for me to enter. I dropped through, into a darker chamber. Powdered bone fell onto me and to the floor. The room was small. I could reach the ceiling above. The man dropped beside me. Hell, once again, seemed to just appear. The overhead door sealed shut, and the room went completely black. It reeked of urine and feces. "I can't see," I said. The man's fingertips lit like candles. He used them to light some nearby torches. Chained along the walls, their arms and legs spread like an X, were 3 men. They looked much like the previous prisoners I'd seen. Long-haired and bearded. They watched us through weary eyes. "Hello, boys," Hal's father greeted. The men let out a tired groan. "Loki," one of the men wheezed. The red-headed man hushed him, but it was too late. "You're Loki?" I asked. He rolled his eyes. "Thanks for spoiling the surprise, Tyr." "Like the Norse god?" I asked. Yes, I am him, and this is Tyr." Loki pulled a dagger and stabbed Tyr in the gut. Tyr cried out from the pain. Loki lifted the dagger rigidly, disemboweling Tyr, and then wiped it off on the chest of the next man. Tyr had been eviscerated. His body trembled as he hung dying. My stomach dropped as I watched. I glanced to Hel to see if she had any reaction to the brutality we just witnessed. She had not flinched. "This one here is Hermod." Loki grabbed a fistful of the man's hair and held the dagger to his throat. "He's the reason you're alive again. Isn't that right, Hermod?" Hermod looked at me and his eyes widened. He opened his mouth to speak, before he was violently interrupted. He let out a wet gurgle as Loki slit his throat. A fountain of blood poured from his neck as his life drained out of him. The final man listened with dread at the sound of the dying men. His empty gaze was that of a blind man. "And then we have Hod," Loki said as he approached him. Oh, how useful this blind fool was. Loki ran the backs of his fingers across the frightened man's cheek. "He's the one who killed you." Loki reared back and drove the dagger through the center of the man's head, killing him instantly. There was a splintering sound as Loki removed the blade from Hod's skull. He turned to me and smirked. "But now, you're back." Loki stepped over to me and watched as the remaining 2 men bled to death. I could not. I had to look away. The trembling and gagging stopped, leaving behind only the steady dripping of blood as it rolled down their legs and off their feet. My hand shook as I gripped my useless sword. The floor opened and Loki guided me over. A spiraling stairwell. I glanced once more at the poor souls, and thought to myself at least they would no longer suffer. "Make yourself useful, daughter," said Loki, leading me down the stairs simultaneously. I stole a quick glance of Hel approaching the hanging men, before my vision was obstructed. As we descended further, I could hear gasping overhead, as they were resurrected back to life. Loki spoke before I could. "Your brothers live again." "My brothers?" Loki sighed as he continued down the stairs. "Unfortunately." "Enough beating around the bush, tell me who I am!" Loki did not stop. As much as I wanted to keep it a surprise, I suspect your mother will not be so cooperative. My breathing halted. My mother? Yes, yes. She is in the next room. Come on. We traveled further down the stairs, my heart racing with anticipation. We eventually entered a large stone chamber, another one that was mostly empty. An older woman was chained to the floor in the center of the room, slumped over, starting at the ground. We moved towards her. My heart was ready to explode inside my chest. This was not my mother, not the one I grew up knowing, but there was something deep within me that recognized her. She weakly lifted her head and let out a whimper that echoed through the chamber like a cathedral. Tears began to fill her eyes. My son. Her frail voice trembled. Loki did not make any attempt to interrupt, despite being annoyed. I slowly approached the old woman, close enough that I could see her clearly. Her long white hair, her gaunt, wrinkled face. Her eyes searched me in astonishment. She uttered my name, the name I'd been unable to remember. Balder.